1943, Station 9, The Fry. Douglas Everett walked into the staff bar carrying 26 ounces of compressed murder in his sleeve. The scientist spent the evening drinking with colleagues, laughing at jokes, ordering rounds. What happened next would demonstrate one of the most remarkable achievements in covert weapons engineering. Hidden perfectly above his elbow sat a weapon so revolutionary that nobody in that crowded room could detect it. As conversations flowed and glasses clinked, Everett casually squeezed a concealed trigger mechanism. A bullet tore through the air and buried itself deep into a nearby sandbag. The sound, barely louder than someone snapping their fingers. Not one person turned their head, not a single conversation paused. The deadly shot had been completely invisible to everyone present. In that moment, Everett proved what British weapons designers had been working toward for years. They had finally cracked a problem that had plagued assassins throughout history. How do you eliminate a target in plain sight, surrounded by witnesses and guards, then simply walk away as if nothing happened? What made this demonstration possible looked nothing like a conventional firearm. It worked with terrifying efficiency, and by the time it was perfected, the war was nearly over. Today, you can count the surviving examples on one hand. This is the story of the sleeve gun, perhaps the most brilliant assassination weapon that history forgot. Let's go back to understand why this weapon needed to exist in the first place. British intelligence faced a brutal reality in the early 1940s. SOE operatives, the men and women dropped behind enemy lines, had a simple but deadly job: eliminate high-value targets across Nazi-occupied Europe. We're talking about senior Nazi officials, Gestapo informants who were destroying resistance networks, and collaborators who had blood on their hands. But here's the problem. These people didn't walk around alone. They traveled with armed guards. They were paranoid. They were protected. Traditional assassination methods just didn't work against prepared targets. Think about it. A knife meant getting close enough to grapple, and it left blood everywhere. Poison took too long and could be traced back through forensic analysis. Regular pistols? They created enough noise to bring every guard running within seconds. Even if an operative managed to pull off the kill, escaping after gunfire erupted became virtually impossible. Once those first shots rang out, the building locked down, exits got blocked, and your chances of survival dropped to nearly zero. The British had already developed one answer: the Welrod silent pistol, also born at Station 9. This weapon chambered either 32 ACP or 380 rounds and achieved something remarkable. When fired, it produced only about 73 decibels of sound, comparable to a pneumatic pellet gun. The engineering behind it was fascinating. The barrel had ports that slowly released powder gases into expansion chambers. Rubber and leather washers sealed tight around each bullet as it passed through. Metal baffles inside further slowed down the escaping gases. By 1942, the engineers working at the Frith had basically perfected suppressor technology. Roughly 2,800 Welrods entered active service during the war. They racked up confirmed kills in Denmark, Norway, and France. But the Welrod had limitations: 12 inches long with the suppressor attached, nearly 40 ounces in weight. Operatives could hide it under heavy coats in winter, but summer? Forget it. More importantly, German security forces weren't stupid. They conducted random pat-downs all the time. If they discovered a hard, foot-long metal tube hidden in someone's coat, that person was immediately arrested and executed. Beyond that, the Welrods still required drawing the weapon, taking aim, and firing. Those actions, even quick ones, gave guards precious seconds to react and overwhelm the shooter. British intelligence needed something completely different, something that could pass even the most aggressive search, something that deployed in an instant without obvious movement, something that automatically disposed of evidence. A weapon specifically engineered for killing during handshakes, friendly embraces, or any moment of close contact where pulling out a conventional gun would be suicide. Enter Major Hugh Quentin Elaine Reeves. Born in 1909 in Seaford, Sussex, Reeves studied engineering at Sidney Sussex College, Cambridge. When he joined Station 9, he quickly became one of their most productive inventors. His creations included the Welrod itself, the Welbike folding motorcycle that could be dropped by parachute, the Welfreighter supply submarine, the Wellman one-man submarine for harbor attacks, and numerous other devices that pushed the boundaries of what was possible. Everything created at Station 9 carried the WWII prefix as a kind of signature. In 1943, Reeves began work on what would become his most ingenious creation, though it carried a more straightforward name, the Sleeve Gun Mark I, item number 254 in the classified catalog of special devices. Reeves understood that the core suppressor technology from the well rod already worked perfectly, so he started there. The integrated silencer used the exact same ported barrel system, channeling gases into an expansion chamber. Those same rubber and leather washers sealed around each bullet. Metal baffles continued slowing the gas release. Now, this system degraded after roughly 15 rounds, but Reeves designed the sleeve gun with a completely different philosophy. This wasn't meant for extended use. The SOE catalog made this crystal clear. The silencing element cannot be removed for replacement because the gun isn't intended for prolonged use. An operative would fire once, complete the assassination, and throw the weapon away. Reloading was described in official documents as extremely elaborate, making this essentially a single-shot system. The truly revolutionary aspect came in the weapon's physical form. Instead of a pistol shape with all its recognizable features, Reeves created a simple metal tube, 8 3/4 inches long, 1 1/4 inches in diameter. The tubular profile resembled a short flashlight or a metal baton. This design eliminated every single protruding element that might snag on fabric during deployment. No pistol grip, no external hammer, no magazine sticking out, no external safety switches breaking the smooth profile. The weapon weighed 26 ounces, heavy enough to use as an emergency club if things went wrong, but light enough to conceal comfortably. 65 by 17 millimeter Browning cartridges. This round provided adequate stopping power at point-blank range while remaining subsonic when suppressed, eliminating the supersonic crack that would otherwise betray the shot location. The firing mechanism deliberately avoided anything resembling a conventional trigger. A knurled sliding thumb switch sat near the muzzle end. To fire, the operator had to push it forward, then pull it backward. This two-stage action made accidental discharge while the weapon rested in your sleeve virtually impossible. The mechanism functioned as both trigger and safety simultaneously. No separate safety lever, no additional button to press. The deliberate two-motion sequence prevented tragic accidents while ensuring the weapon deployed rapidly when needed. Every material choice reflected complete sanitization. Look at one of these weapons in a museum today and you'll find no manufacturer markings anywhere, no country of origin stamps, no identifying symbols beyond a serial number and some cryptic inspection marks that meant nothing to enemy intelligence. If an operative got captured with this weapon, nothing on it would trace back to Britain. Birmingham's small arms company manufactured these weapons, though BSA has historically refused to confirm details of their covert wartime production. Manufacturing likely occurred in isolated workshops completely separate from their standard military contracts to maintain absolute secrecy. The first version, the Sleeve Gun Mark I, had serious problems. It chambered 22 long rifle ammunition instead of 32 ACP. That cartridge simply lacked the stopping power for reliable kills at contact distance. The trigger mechanism sat in a separate housing tube that attached to the suppressor, making the whole weapon bulky and awkward to handle. German intelligence assessments after the war described it as unwieldy. More dangerously, the light trigger proved prone to accidental discharge. An operative could genuinely shoot themselves in the foot while the weapon just rested in their sleeve. Fewer than 50 Mark I versions got manufactured before development immediately shifted to fix these flaws. The Mark II addressed every single problem. Upgrading to 32 ACP provided significantly greater lethality. The trigger bar now lay flat and completely exposed rather than enclosed in that separate housing, dramatically slimming down the profile. The knurled trigger button now required tilting back before pushing forward, though official documents acknowledge this made operation more difficult for an already stressed assassin trying to execute a kill under pressure. The cocking lever got repositioned to reduce the chance of snagging on sleeve fabric during rapid deployment. These refinements transformed the weapon from a flawed prototype into a genuinely practical assassination system. The concealment method represented perhaps the most innovative feature of the entire design. The weapon included a lanyard hole drilled at the suppressor end. An elastic rubber cord threaded through this hole and attached to a fixed point at the operator's shoulder running underneath their clothing. In the ready position, the sleeve gun rested concealed above the elbow inside a long-sleeved jacket or coat. When needed, the operative simply relaxed their arm and allowed gravity to do the work. The weapon slid smoothly down and out of the sleeve directly into their waiting hand. The tubular design, with absolutely no protruding elements, meant perfectly smooth deployment without any fabric catching or snagging. The intended use scenario was direct body contact. Press the muzzle flush against the target's torso or back. The official SOE catalog specified the weapon was intended for use in contact with the target, though it could be used at ranges up to about 3 yards if necessary. That 3-yard maximum reflected both the 32 ACP's limited ballistic performance when suppressed and the difficulty of achieving precise aim with minimal sighting provisions. The concave muzzle face allowed perfect flush contact against clothing or bare skin. Picture the scenario. An operative approaches their target during what appears to be a completely friendly interaction. A handshake at a formal function. An embrace between supposed allies. A congratulatory pat on the shoulder. The weapon deploys silently into the assassin's hand. One smooth motion presses the muzzle against the target's torso, hidden by the natural closeness of the interaction. The 2-stage trigger activates. The suppressed report measures around 73 decibels, quieter than normal conversation in a crowded room, completely masked by ambient noise. After firing, the operator simply releases their grip. The elastic cord automatically retracts the weapon back up the sleeve, carrying the spent casing still lodged inside the breech away from the crime scene. This left essentially zero evidence behind. No ejected brass casing on the ground for investigators to find. No visible weapon in the assassin's hand for witnesses to report. No powder burns on the shooter's skin indicating who fired. Guards arriving seconds later would find a victim bleeding out, a confused and panicked crowd, and absolutely no obvious shooter to apprehend. The operative could express the same shock and confusion as everyone else before calmly walking out with the crowd. Lieutenant Colonel John Robert Vernon Dolphin commanded Station 9 starting in June 1943, directly overseeing the sleeve gun's development. Professor Dudley Morris Newitt, a Fellow of the Royal Society, led the scientific research efforts. The collaborative environment at the Frith produced absolutely extraordinary innovations beyond just the sleeve gun. The remote control pistol, a Colt 1903 mounted on a waist harness with a Bowden cable trigger running through the operator's sleeve, saw production of only 40 to 50 units total. The sleeve gun entered production at approximately 150 to 200 units, a limited quantity that suggests SOE leadership recognized the weapon's extremely narrow operational applicability. Production timing proved absolutely critical to understanding why this weapon never achieved its potential legendary reputation in actual combat. Manufacturing apparently didn't commence until late 1944 at the earliest, according to Imperial War Museum documentation. This extraordinarily late start meant deployment to occupied Europe, training agents in its use, and conducting actual field operations all faced a severely compressed time window before VE Day arrived on May 8, 1945. The weapon got developed, perfected, manufactured in limited quantities, and then the war ended before sufficient time allowed for meaningful operational deployment. No confirmed combat employment has ever been documented in any official records, despite persistent legends and rumors of handshake assassinations that circulate to this day. This absence becomes truly striking when you compare it to the Welrod's extensive and thoroughly confirmed service record. Danish SOE agent Sman Nielsen used a Welrod to kill a German sentry at Kastrup Airport in December 1943. In January 1944, the Danish resistance used Welrods to eliminate a Nazi collaborator named Nordentoft. Multiple documented operational uses occurred throughout Denmark, Norway, and France across the war years. The Welrod remained in active British service through the Falklands War in 1982 and even Desert Storm in 1991. Agent memoirs mentioned it extensively. Post-war debriefings describe its use in detail. Intelligence reports reference captured examples found on dead or arrested agents. The Welrod's combat history is thoroughly, comprehensively documented across multiple independent sources. No equivalent historical record exists anywhere for the sleeve gun. No agent memoirs mention using it operationally. No post-war debriefings describe sleeve gun assassinations in any theater of war. No German intelligence reports reference captured examples being discovered on SOE agents. Though we know Germans were absolutely shocked when they captured a remote control pistol Mark I from the body of SOE agent Karl Brun in Denmark in December 1941, clearly demonstrating German awareness of British covert weapons capabilities, the sleeve gun simply never appears in any operational records we found. Yet the weapon's technical superiority over all Allied and Axis equivalents remains absolutely clear, even without combat validation to prove it. Look at what America developed. The OSS Stinger pen gun, chambered in .22 short, saw approximately 50,000 units manufactured by Joseph Dixon Crucible Company, far exceeding British production numbers. However, early versions suffered significant reliability problems, including frequent misfires and occasionally burst barrels that could injure the shooter. The weapon was officially recommended for pressing into the back of a target's neck and firing upward into the brainstem, requiring extremely precise placement with what was already an underpowered cartridge. The pen gun offered absolutely no sound suppression, creating a sharp report that would alert everyone within earshot. It provided no automatic concealment mechanism after firing. The operatives stood there holding obvious evidence in their hand. The Sedgley OSS glove pistol, chambered in .38 Special, offered significantly greater lethality, but much cruder concealment. Mounted on a leather glove with a plunger trigger extending parallel to the barrel, it fired when the wearer punched their target in close combat. Only 52 to 200 units were ever produced. The obvious bulge on the hand made it impractical without very careful sleeve coverage to hide it. More critically, the weapon completely lacked any sound suppression whatsoever. Firing a .38 Special round in an enclosed space would permanently damage the shooter's hearing while simultaneously alerting every guard within 100 yards. The glove pistol was purely a desperation weapon for captured agents facing execution, not a practical assassination system for planned operations. The FP-45 Liberator demonstrated American mass production capability impressively. 1 million units manufactured in just 11 weeks at $2.10 each, roughly $40 in today's money adjusted for inflation. However, it was completely unsilenced with an unrifled smoothbore barrel that limited effective range to 1 to 4 yards maximum. The weapon was specifically designed as a gun to get a better gun for resistance fighters rather than a proper assassination tool. Operatives would use it to kill an isolated enemy soldier, then take that soldier's rifle and ammunition for continued resistance operations. The Liberator served a completely different strategic mission than the sleeve gun. Germany developed no equivalent covert assassination weapons despite extensive research into intelligence services archives by historians. No purpose-built concealed assassination devices comparable to British or American systems have been identified from Gestapo, SD, or Abwehr sources that survived the war. German security services relied exclusively on conventional concealed carry pistols like the Walther PPK, chambered in .32 ACP or .380 ACP for close protection and covert work. Pre-war German hunting stores sold gas pens containing pepper spray for personal protection, but these were civilian self-defense items rather than military intelligence weapons. This complete absence reflects fundamentally different operational philosophies between German and British intelligence. German security services operated primarily through overt intimidation, comprehensive surveillance networks, and conventional overwhelming force rather than covert surgical assassination of specific individuals. The British sleeve gun's advantages over every single Allied equivalent included Purpose-built integral suppressors rather than aftermarket editions that added bulk, rubber and leather baffle technology achieving approximately 73 decibel sound levels, automatic evidence concealment via elastic retraction with the spent casing retained inside the weapon, completely sanitized manufacturing with absolutely no identifying marks that could compromise the source, and contact-optimized design with a concave muzzle specifically shaped for flush shots pressed directly against targets. The weapon represented the absolute pinnacle of covert assassination engineering in World War II. Even though operational circumstances prevented its actual use in combat, the engineering achievement stands on its own merit. Only 3 confirmed examples survive in museum collections worldwide today. The Royal Armoury's National Firearms Centre in Leeds, England holds serial numbers 1 and 11. The Royal Armoury's collection includes multiple other SOE weapons, including the only surviving Welrod Mark I prototype. Curator Mark Murray authored key academic research clarifying the distinction between the sleeve gun and a different weapon called the Welwand, which had been confused in many earlier sources. The Norwegian Armed Forces Museum at Bergenhus Fortress in Bergen holds serial number 8 under inventory numbers that establish its authentication. This example's presence in Norway may reflect SOE operations supporting Norwegian resistance forces or equipment supplies provided to local networks, though no specific provenance documentation has been published linking it to particular operations. The extreme rarity reflects both the limited production run and deliberate disposal protocols that SOE maintained. SOE weapons were always intended for field destruction after use or compromise. Operatives carried no equipment whatsoever that could compromise ongoing missions if they were captured and interrogated. The 3 survivors almost certainly represent evaluation samples retained at Station 9 for testing purposes, or training examples that never actually deployed to operational theaters in occupied Europe. Every field-deployed sleeve gun was almost certainly destroyed, whether it was used or not, as agents completed their missions or evacuated at the war's end. Primary source documentation remains frustratingly fragmentary even today. The National Archives at Kew holds primary SOE records in the HS series classification, though many critical files were completely destroyed in the devastating 1946 Baker Street fire and subsequent intentional document destruction. Key surviving references include file HS-727 containing Lieutenant Colonel John Dolphin Bliss's official history of SOE Experimental Station 9, written in 1945, and file HS-896 containing location lists of various research stations. Personnel files stored in the HS-9 series may remain sealed and closed to researchers for 100 years from each individual's birth date to protect privacy. The Imperial War Museum maintains significant SOE collections, including an actual sleeve gun Mark II and sound recordings of lectures on weapons and equipment given at the 1998 SOE conference by surviving veterans and researchers. The most comprehensive published source available remains the book by Frederick Boyce and Douglas Everett titled SOE: The Scientific Secrets, published by Sutton Publishing in 2003 and reissued in 2004. Everett himself was the scientist who conducted that famous staff bar test, proving the weapon's suppression and concealment capabilities worked exactly as designed. Researcher Anders Tingeliffe published an article titled The Welrod 32 Silent Pistol in the Arms and Armor Journal, Volume 19, Number 1 in 2022, representing the first detailed scholarly study using previously unavailable archival sources. Critically, the actual weapon blueprints and technical specifications reportedly remain classified in the UK even to this day, an extraordinary security status for a World War II-era weapon. This suggests continued sensitivity around advanced suppressor technology and covert weapons engineering that governments still consider operationally relevant. The strategic impact came not through documented battlefield resolves, but through the weapon's very existence fundamentally changing operational planning on both sides. German security forces in occupied territories knew with absolute certainty that British intelligence possessed sophisticated silent weapons. Captured Welrods proved it. Interrogated agents described them. This knowledge forced significant changes in protection protocols for high-value targets across occupied Europe. Officials reduced their public appearances dramatically. Guard details increased in size and alertness. Security sweeps before meetings became far more thorough and invasive. The mere possibility that an assassin could kill completely silently during what appeared to be a friendly interaction created an atmosphere of paranoia that limited target mobility and accessibility. The sleeve gun contributed powerfully to this psychological effect even without any documented kills, simply because German intelligence knew such weapons existed and couldn't reliably detect them. Major Hugh Reeves himself met a tragic end that highlighted the bitter irony of his entire career. On October 25, 1955, at RAF Wittering, Reeves was accidentally drawn into the intake of a Hawker Hunter jet engine during noise suppression tests he was conducting. A man whose entire wartime work centered obsessively on achieving perfect silence died in one of the loudest, most violent industrial accidents imaginable. His post-war patents included diving equipment improvements in 1950 and aircraft wheel chocks in 1955. The brilliant, inventive mind that created the Wellrod, the Wellbike, the Wellman submarine, and the sleeve gun continued innovating and solving engineering problems right until his death at just 46 years old. The weapon's legacy persists powerfully in popular culture despite its complete lack of operational combat record. Films and novels frequently depict sleeve guns as the ultimate assassin's tool, though usually incorrectly attributed to the KGB or other Cold War organizations rather than their actual British SOE origin. The concept's pure elegance captures imagination more effectively than documented historical reality ever could. A weapon that deploys instantly, kills completely silently, and vanishes automatically back into concealment represents the perfect theoretical assassination weapon. The sleeve gun became genuinely legendary precisely because it embodied this theoretical perfection, regardless of whether anyone actually used it to kill in combat. For understanding British weapons development philosophy, the sleeve gun demonstrates that genuine innovation doesn't require battlefield validation to prove its worth. The weapon solved real operational problems through elegant engineering solutions. It achieved measurable technical superiority over every equivalent system any nation produced. The sound suppression matched the already proven Wellrod standard. The concealment system worked flawlessly, as Douglas Everett publicly demonstrated. The automatic evidence elimination functioned reliably in testing. Every single technical specification met or significantly exceeded operational requirements. The weapon succeeded completely as an engineering achievement, even though operational timing prevented any combat proof of concept. The contrast with German approaches proves genuinely instructive about different military philosophies. Britain invested enormous resources into specialized covert weapons development, establishing Station 9 in August 1939 before the war even properly began, then expanding it dramatically under SOE control from July 1940 onward. This 2-year head start over American OSS formation in June 1942 gave British engineers critical time to perfect advanced technologies like integral suppressors and elastic retraction systems. Germany never created any equivalent dedicated research facilities, instead focusing their innovation almost exclusively on conventional military weapons like the STG-44 assault rifle, the MG-42 machine gun, and Tiger tanks. British intelligence recognized early that unconventional weapons offered strategic advantages far beyond simple firepower measurements. Advantages like eliminating specific targets without alerting their guards, or killing in crowded public spaces without witnesses being able to identify the shooter afterward. April 1943, the Frith in Welwyn Garden City. Douglas Everett walked into the staff bar with 26 ounces of compressed murder concealed perfectly in his sleeve. The evening proceeded completely normally, with drinks flowing and conversations continuing until at some unremarked moment, Everett casually fired a .32 caliber round into a sandbag positioned nearby. Nobody heard the shot. Nobody noticed anything unusual. Nobody reacted whatsoever. The test proved absolutely everything the engineers needed to know. The suppressor worked perfectly. The concealment worked flawlessly. The deployment worked smoothly. British engineers had successfully created what could genuinely be called a perfect assassination weapon. Then the war ended before anyone could actually use it in combat operations. 3 examples survive today in museum collections. Original blueprints remain officially classified 8 decades later. 0 confirmed kills exist anywhere in operational records. The sleeve gun remains history's most successful weapon that never actually killed anyone, proving that sometimes the very best British engineering creates legends far more enduring than any battlefield victories.